His full name was Louis Joseph de Montcalm, born on February 28, 1712. He was the son of Louis Daniel de Montcalm and Marie-Thérèse Charlotte de Lorgy de Castellane. He came of a noble background because the Montcalms were an old and distinguished family of the nobility of the robe. Not until the age of 20, in 1732, de Montcalm became very active and involved in his military career. Though he was, of course, educated in an aristocracy manner, his private tutor often regards him as too opinionated and stubborn, which he is right when we find out later on. In 1735, the death of his father enabled him to become the Marquis de Saint-Véran, in which he inherits the honors, rights, and debts of that position. Although he already had many riches and power due to his noble background, the marriage between him and Angelique Talon de Bourbon acted as a catalyst in which it gave a rapid rise to Montcalm in the military hierarchy. This was made possible because the Bourbon family were part of old and powerful families of the robe, in which they had powerful connections at court. Well, Montcalm's commission and instructions strictly stated that Pierre de Régal de Vaudreuil, which is the Governor-General of New France, had absolute control over all armed forces in the colony, and that Montcalm was only a subordinate to him in everything. Montcalm's responsibility was only for the discipline, administration, and internal ordering of the army. He was just the commander in the field and had to obey orders he received. He was also strictly ordered to keep on good terms with the Governor-General. These instructions were carefully drafted and revised many times so that conflicts could be avoided between the two senior officers. Unlike Vaudreuil, Montcalm was physically small and rather chubby, and determined all things must go his way. He was critical of everything that did not meet his ideas and of anyone who failed to completely agree with him. Montcalm only believed that laying on a static defense was the only way against British regular troops, and totally disagreed with Vaudreuil's idea of guerrilla warfare, and insisted the only way to fight the war was the way war was fought in Europe. He quickly became annoyed towards Vaudreuil and also towards all Canadian things, believing the Canadian regulars had an inflated opinion of themselves, and criticized the militia was an undisciplined rabble of little or no military value. At the same time, Montcalm claimed to have won the hearts of Canadians and the affection of Indians, claiming that Vaudreuil was just jealous of him. I agree, but it was quite common in the French army during the 18th century for a general to hold a low opinion to his superior. A senior officer, such as Vaudreuil himself, had to devote much of his time countering criticisms and intrigue of other general officers. Montcalm, of course, was one of them. Even the Minister of War encouraged intrigue by helping Montcalm establish a private channel so that he can attack Vaudreuil more easily. Yeah, you will see how good Montcalm is with political intrigue later on. Vaudreuil wanted to disrupt a possible invasion route in which Montcalm was ordered to first destroy Fort Henry and then Fort Edward. Vaudreuil specifically ordered Montcalm that nothing less than this manifest danger should deter from marching on Fort Edward. After taking over Fort Henry, they obtained many supplies such as food enough to sustain 6,000 men for 6 whole weeks. Yet, Montcalm refused to go further and destroy Fort Edward because he believed the road condition was too terrible, that there was an ambush of 4,000 to 5,000 militia, that the food supply was not enough to last the trip. This was in fact hard to believe because the road to Fort Edward only required a day's march. Furthermore, the food supply to obtain can feed 6,000 soldiers for 6 whole weeks. Vaudreuil, no doubt, was very angry at Montcalm's decision, and he and several senior French officers regarded them as mere excuses. Montcalm, on the other hand, was well pleased with what he had accomplished. He even dispatched to the Minister of War claiming that he had done everything to please Vaudreuil and submitted a plea of promotions to Lieutenant General. Actually, you are wrong. Since the Minister of Marine was already distracted by the soaring cost of military operations in America, he believed Montcalm's words and now tended to give greater trust to Montcalm. Montcalm continued to assault Vaudreuil's position by reports of excessive gambling and banquets indulged in by Vaudreuil's entourage. Vaudreuil's position was further weakened during 1758 when Montcalm refused to comply with Vaudreuil's plan to block British drive on Lake Champlain. Vaudreuil unwillingly had the plan revised to avoid a public scandal and the disruption of the campaign, but allowed Montcalm another chance to take a sharp blow on Vaudreuil's position and made the incident public. I personally find the battle at the Plains of Abraham very interesting because of a series of blunders made by two famous commanders of the time. Wolfe sent an assault on the Montmorency-Beauport lines on July 31st, but was defeated greatly. Vaudreuil predicted that he would surely not attack the same place twice and was worried that Wolfe would attack above Quebec City. Unsurprisingly, Montcalm refused to believe a word Vaudreuil said and remained convinced that Wolfe would attack the same place again, but it turns out that Vaudreuil was right. Wolfe's purpose was to force Montcalm to come out of his lines and give battle. Vaudreuil strongly suggested strengthening the forces above Quebec, but Montcalm replied Vaudreuil's concern as ill-advised and insisted Vaudreuil's forces to hold below Quebec. September 13th of 1759, a series of errors had led Wolfe and his troops to accidentally land at Anse-Foulon, and within hours 4,500 British men had prepared themselves on the Plains of Abraham. Montcalm was so stubborn that he refused to believe such a report until he saw it with his own eyes. Actually, there was no need for Montcalm to even engage in battle because of the limited supplies of the British. Wolfe had to retreat no matter what by September 20th, but because Montcalm feared that withdrawal would be an over-costly operation, he made a decision that ensured his defeat. He decided to attack the troops he had at the moment, leaving the high ground, and most importantly, failed to wait for reinforcements from Bougainville. In fact, it was Vaudreuil who sent the news to Bougainville. Moreover, because the militia was recently incorporated and trained, Montcalm had no chance against Wolfe's well-trained and disciplined troops. He was lucky enough to even escape total destruction of the French regulars thanks to the Canadian militia in the Plains, which Montcalm criticized him for. Montcalm was badly wounded in this battle, and surprisingly for once, he let Vaudreuil make a decision, in which at the end terms of surrender had been made. Montcalm passed away at 5 in the morning of September 8th. Well, it cannot be said that Montcalm was directly responsible for the loss of the French colonial empire in North America. Montcalm sets a perfect example of the French military system in which the system critically required reconstruction. He was basically a product of it. Even if Montcalm had not lost against Wolfe, in the long run, the French would still lose the French colonial empire in North America because Montcalm relied too heavily on the French military system. For instance, Montcalm never approved Vaudreuil's idea of guerrilla warfare and only believed in European-style warfare, which was way less effective. Furthermore, political intrigue was too common for the French during the mid-18th century, in which Montcalm also sets a good example of. There is no doubt that Montcalm was a strong, brave soldier, but it was his narrow-minded, self-serving-like personalities that made him unfit to command an army. Though if Montcalm did not grow up from a failing French military system, under Vaudreuil's guidance, they both would make a dynamic group. Well, the French had been overly distracted by the European War to challenge the Royal Navy's control of sea communications. Basically, the French priority wasn't even the colonies. On top of that, as I mentioned before, the French had a failing French military system and too much political intrigue. Unlike the British, they had strong naval power, and their focus was the colonies itself. Many sites and landmarks were named to honor Montcalm. In Oswego, New York, Montcalm Park was established. During 1865 to 1891, an armored corvette was named in his honor. Also, in 1975, a F-70 type anti-submarine was named the Montcalm in honor of Montcalm himself. Well, I will commemorate Montcalm by creating a bronze statue, placing it inside Quebec City. The self-confident facial expression of the statue will remind Canadians not to make the same mistake Montcalm did 300 years ago. The statue will illustrate Montcalm pointing outward with his right hand, as if he was commanding his troops to storm forward. Yet, In his left hand, there is a letter to his wife, illustrating him not only as a French commander, but also an important romantic figure of the mid-18th century.